Hi, everybody. Today I want to talk to you about vibes. I'm talking about the vibes that you put out in the world when you're around. It's just your energy, is another way of putting it. The energy that you put out as you're walking around the world and how that affects your success or relationships or ability to meet people, whatever it is you're kind of working on. So someone recently brought to my attention that I can put out a really strong vibe when I'm upset. And I did some reflection on that and I was like, you know what, that's so true, because when I am, say, disappointed, it's really huge for me. And even though I don't mean to do it, that just oozes out of me and kind of takes over the space I'm around. And I can really get this because the other day I was in a room with some people who are really having a challenging time going through things. And I could really sense their vibe, and it was really hard to be in the same space as them. Not that they were directly vibing me. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about, although that is part of this conversation. What I'm talking about is they were just so sad and upset that the vibe in the room was really noticeable and hard to be around. It made me wonder about the vibes we put out and the effect on our success in life. And is it possible to change our vibes or our energy? Definitely. I think back to all the years I used to interview people, and one of the big things that really affected my opinion was the vibes that they gave off. It wasn't even so much things they said or that type of thing. It was more like just the vibe they gave off and my interpretation of it. So much of our opinion is formulated on things that people put out into the world that aren't part of their language or their appearance or anything like that, but it's just these vibes that you put out. You've all kind of felt it. Imagine yourself going to a party, and if you see people sitting in a couch, huddled together, talking about something that the impression is negative to you, you don't feel like you want to go over and talk to them. You sort of veer away over to somebody else who might be putting out a more open vibe. Or when you go out, people are kind of clustered together and your impression is like, oh, this is a clique, or this is hard to integrate into this group. So you kind of steer away to other people. And that is because the vibe they're giving off is telling you don't come here, or we don't want to interact with others, or maybe it's fear of interacting with others, things like that. Sometimes you go to a restaurant or a bar, something like that, and you think to yourself, for reasons unknown, I don't really want to sit over there. Can I sit over here when someone's seating you? And a lot of that can be just the vibes of the people on the table, around the table next to the open table that you might be seated by. There's a lot of other vibes, like sometimes you want to sit in a different spot simply because there's like this dark corner and all the vibes have kind of collected there, all the energy's kind of collected there. And just energetically, without really noticing it, you don't want to go over there. So what is your vibe? What do you put out? And what kind of vibes do you want to put out? What are you looking to do? When you go to a party, do you want people to energetically come to you and start talking to you? Do you put out an open vibe? Is that what you want? When you're going to a job interview, do you want to put out a vibe of being fun to work with, competent, etc.? When you're just walking around in your daily life, what do you want to be perceived as by people that don't know you at all? Their very first split impression of you. What do you want them to think? That is really based on your vibe. So vibes can affect so much of our life. What are some tips about vibes maybe that we can use so that we can start to change the vibes or energy that we put out? So one of the things that's really easy to change, I mean, it does take some work. All these take some work, but physical things you can do to change your vibe. One is your posture. I'm not talking about being ingenuine, but I am talking about just changing small things about yourself that maybe you can. Maybe sit a little taller, work on your posture. That's good for your body in general. As you know, you've probably got a lot of that when you were a kid from your parents or teachers and things like that. Your facial expression also cues a lot of people. So if you're always scowling and things like that, people might perceive you as being crabby, mean, when you aren't actually, but you're just, kind of walking around. A lot of people will adopt this like knitted brow all the time and they don't realize they're doing it. And your posture, this can kind of be like, well, they don't want to meet me. They're closed off. They're sad. I can't deal with sadness, so I'll just kind of avoid them. Eye contact is also a big thing. If you don't make eye contact when people are talking, like you're looking all around while people are talking, people perceive that as you don't really care about them and what they have to say. It can be that they think you're bored with them or uninterested, or you're looking for something better, and maybe you don't care. Feeling like someone cares about you promotes feelings of being loved and appreciated. So if you make eye contact with people, oftentimes they think, oh, this is a loving person. You're putting out a loving vibe and a caring vibe, and you're making them feel comfortable. So making eye contact, paying attention to your posture. Another thing about your posture can be this. This is very closed off posture. I know we all do it. I do it myself just because I don't know where to put my hands, and you can rest them here, especially if you don't have pockets. But try to work on, other ways of holding your hands so that you're not kind of being closed off. So there's all these things about posture. Don't stand with your back towards people. If people come into the circle, step back and let them be part of the circle, things like that. They kind of change your vibe over time when you shift that way of being. It also shifts your vibe. Once you look into the eyes of another, you're receiving their vibe, their energy, and that can change your energy. So that's really important. And these are all things that can change your vibe just because you physically did something else. Like standing up tall is a different feeling for you inside than being like this. That can change your vibe just by opening up your heart. If you're feeling like, wow, that's a challenge because I've always kind of walked around like this, do some heart opening yoga exercises, like even something like this to just kind of open that space of your heart and various things like that. You can look up all different kinds of heart opening movements. They also feel really good on your shoulders, things like that. But even just doing that can shift your vibe and your feelings within yourself. Another thing, and this is really important in job interviews, is fidgeting. So fidgeting gives off a vibe of being unempowered or incapable or dishonest or nervous. If you're like fidgeting all the time while people are talking, they think you're being ingenuine, or you are, say you're not making eye contact with them and you're fidgeting all around. They think that maybe you're lying, you're unempowered, you're not capable of doing stuff because you can't stop doing this. You're extremely nervous, and nervous energy is hard for some people to be around. So if you're always doing this, it's nervousness, and that's hard for some people to be around. Try to stop doing that and center yourself. Like if you're going into a job interview or you're going to give a talk or a meeting or anything, going into a party for the first time, you don't know many people, things like that, going to a class for the first time, try to kind of just center yourself, take a 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, couple of minutes to just center yourself, to just maybe do some breathing, maybe do some heart openers, some deep, slow breathing. Maybe you breathe in for the count of 4, then breathe out for the count of 4. They just kind of settle yourself before you go in. And when you find yourself kind of fidgeting, you can even say something in the conversation like, oh, I'm just kind of uncomfortable in this chair. Let me get a little bit more comfortable, or something like that. And then just settle down, settle down. Another thing that puts off this really kind of not so calm energy is when you're openly acting distracted. So I've been in a lot of relationships where you're talking to the person and they're constantly distracted by what is happening while you're talking. Like you go to a bar with them, or you go out for a drink or something like that, or you're out to dinner or something like that. And you're sitting directly across from them. And instead of them giving you their attention, they're looking behind you, they're looking around, you're sitting outside, oh, look, there's a plane going by. Oh, I love that car. Wow, did you see that car? I mean, it's fine to do that once in a while, but if you're constantly darting your eyes around so that you're not looking at the person and looking at other things and listening to other people's conversations next to you, rather than putting your energy into the person, that gives off a vibe to the person that you just really don't care about them, or they're just filling space for you. Like you're only out with them because nothing better came up, and you're just kind of just sharing space with them, but you're not really connecting with them. You can also put out a vibe that you're superior. They're not worth listening to. You're better than them. So you can just, zone out while they're talking because it's just all blah, 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 because you're smarter than they are. You want to change your vibe with that. Try to pay attention. And I know like a lot of people have problems with paying attention or sticking with something for a short time. Then you need to tell people straight away, I have a problem really paying attention, and I'm going to do my best to pay attention in this conversation, but I might look away now and again. And I'm working on training myself to stay present in the conversation. A lot of people will also go away if it's a survival mechanism. Say they've had a lot of trauma in their life, they have a very hard time being in their body. They're disassociated, they're going everywhere to not have feelings, trying to stop the feelings. And that's what they're doing. And it's really noticeable to the other people. If that's something that you're doing or you think you might be experiencing, you're putting out a vibe to them, to others that, they just aren't worth your time, that there's something weird with you, or that you think your problems are more important than their problems, or that you're superior. So you want to sort of work on that maybe in small bits, maybe with a therapist if you're really working on some trauma there, and let people know. Even if you're quietly thinking of others while they're talking, you give off the energy that you don't care what they have to say. If you're constantly looking around, this goes back to the not making eye contact and fidgeting. It's all sort of one of the same thing. You're fidgeting, you're looking around, you're not making eye contact. It just gives the impression that you really don't care about them, or that you have a lack of self-confidence. You're not giving off the vibe you want to give off in order to have close relationships or to meet people, especially in job interviews, first dates, walking into parties where you don't know anyone, all those types of things where you're walking into a group of people that you might not know very well. It's important to just, take a moment to center yourself, really, whatever that is you do for you, a 5-minute meditation, deep breaths, maybe a little walk in nature. Sometimes when I'm going to something important like that, I get there a little bit early because I don't want to be stressed out about, oh my God, now I've got to run and figure out where their office is. I just take a moment, I relax. If it's possible to walk through nature, even if it's on the sidewalk where there's green grass in the boulevard or plants in the boulevard or something like that, just to kind of center yourself before you go into the situation, whatever it will be. Do something like that to just really center yourself. And I'm going to do a whole nother video on centering yourself and heart openers and things like that. So stay tuned for that. I kind of talked about scowling and facial expressions. Pensive facial expressions are another thing. And a lot of people adopt these expressions as like just their way of being. Like me, for example, I don't smoke or anything like that, but I feel like I'm getting these wrinkles from constantly doing this. I do that a lot because it's a nervous habit I have. And I'm trying to change that, but I've noticed that I'm getting wrinkles associated with that. So I've been doing it for a long, long time. And that's another thing. If you're always doing these weird scowling things, it will show on your face long term. So think about that. And the last thing I want to talk about is being shy or saying sorry all the time. Both of these things put out a vibe of insecurity or wishy-washiness. And I do this too. I say sorry all the time for things that I didn't even do. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and things like that. Pick and choose what you're going to use the word sorry for. Maybe look up some alternative words for that would mean something more. Like if your friend couldn't find a parking space and they had to park in the parking garage a block away, that's not really your fault. You don't have to say sorry for that. Come up with some different language to use rather than saying, oh, I'm so sorry you had to park an hour away, or an hour away. Can you imagine? A block away, you could say, I feel for you. That type of thing. I feel for you. I hear what you're saying. Those types of things rather than saying sorry for it. And push yourself out of your shyness. If you're just sitting there shy, like last night I was somewhere and the person sitting next to me was really shy and their whole body language was shy. Like they were, just really curled up in a ball, almost not making eye contact, being really shy. And then after we started talking, they were saying that that's something they're trying to work on, not, getting out there and saying hello to people. We all struggle with all these things. Oh, I said that was going to be my last thing, but I want to say one more thing about it that can be really off-putting or put out a bad vibe is being overly sarcastic. If you're overly sarcastic, it puts out a vibe that follows you everywhere. Before you even speak, people can sense your off-putting vibe. I feel like this is one of the biggest vibes people have, other than scowling and putting out an angry vibe. But if you're sarcastic, people think they're going to be judged by you. They think like, okay, when are they going to be the next fodder for your sarcastic joke? They can't confide in you because you'll use their troubles against them as jokes, or they'll tell you a trouble and then you won't ever let them live it down. 20 years later in the relationship, you're still bringing up this one thing you did that was embarrassing or something like that, so they can use it in a sarcastic joke. That really just puts off a very off-putting vibe, and that you're not a good friend. Can't confide in you. You're not a good friend. You're kind of a jerk. So sarcastic is fun. I'm sarcastic myself, but keep it in check. It shouldn't be the whole way you interact with people. And a lot of super sarcastic people are really just that way because they're nervous and shy inside. And that's the mechanism that they've adopted to get out of that space. Try to not be so sarcastic. If you think of a joke, before you just say it, think about how it might affect the other person. And you can slowly kind of convince yourself or help yourself be something different. Not being able to express emotions is another thing. See, I said I wasn't going to say much more. And then here I am saying another one. If you can't express emotions at all, people really pick up on that energetically. And they think that you have a negative viewpoint about emotions and you're incapable of loving, caring, openness, or deep connection. So why even be close to you? If you can't have emotions, they're going to think you're a bad manager, a bad boss. If your only emotion you can express is anger, same goes for all of this. Not being able to have emotions or express emotions or being really weird about emotions make people think that you are going to judge their emotions and they can't be safe around you. You're not creating a safe vibe. You're creating this vibe where like, oh, if I'm not being a robot, this person won't accept me. So I got to get out of this relationship or whatever it is, or they won't be a good manager because they have this expectation that everyone just be a robot. Now, many of these things I've talked about are really just kind of can be honed down to self-worth, which I did a podcast on, and I'll link it in the description. A lot of these kinds of vibe inducing actions just really have to do with your self-worth, and you've kind of created it as a way to cover up your lack of self-worth. You know, it could be slouching, could be scowling, could be really sarcasticness and all the other things. How do you change your vibes? I mean, sometimes you're just going to be sad and disappointed and mad, and that's okay. It's okay to have those certain vibes. Sometimes you're going to want to vibe people to not talk to you, and that's okay. It's not having that vibe become your blanket everyday way of being. That's the finesse here. Talking about your feelings when things come up. If you don't have anyone to talk to, then journal about it. Seek professional help if you need to. Talk to yourself about it. Don't let bad vibes fester inside you and become your way of being. That's one way you can start to change the vibes that you have on your daily life, just walking around. If you're feeling like you have these really bad or negative emotions and you want to not have those because you're going to go to a party or something like that, but something bad happened earlier in the day or something that made you mad, then get out and go for a walk, talk to someone, as I said, seek help, exercise, work on hobbies that make you feel good about yourself, watch a feel-good movie, listen to feel-good music, or read a happy book, something like that. Think happy thoughts, as people say, to kind of get out of the mood. Some people so internalize bad feelings that they start to think everything's out to get them. You know, people they're driving on the road with are all out to get them. That guy that cut you off is out to get you. This person that cut you in line is out to get you. This person that stood in front of you is out to get you. And you're doing things like scowling and being sarcastic and all those other things that we talked about. This is a really big one. Learn to let that go. I know it's hard, but you can do it. Maybe it's a ritual, maybe it's talking about it, maybe it's meditating on it, but you need to learn to let go what isn't serving you. And sometimes you let it go temporarily and it comes back. I've done a lot of podcasts on this where it's really hard to forgive people. Sometimes a situation will bring back the anger that you had about somebody you thought you forgave, but then it turned out you didn't. Those are kind of lifelong processes, right? But if you can learn to let some things go, if somebody cuts you off while you're driving to work, learn to let it go. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they're late to work. You've cut people off yourself not knowing, give people the benefit of the doubt or something like that. Before a big job interview or public speaking or anything that you're nervous about, or you think you might put out the vibe you don't want, role play the situation. Role play the questions, answers. I'll role play everything, like my mannerisms, what I'm going to do, because, I can be really have a lot big mannerisms. So like, what are my mannerisms going to be? What's my facial expression going to be? And I role play everything a couple of times so that I feel more confident. I role play answering the questions. I even role play pauses I might have in the conversation. Practice doing all those things we talked about early, like smiling, standing up straight, being engaged, making eye contact. Practice those things when you're by yourself, like making dinner or whatever, when you're out in public, everywhere. Just slowly kind of practicing putting out a good vibe and see what happens. Practice putting out a happy vibe, sometimes even say to myself, I'm going to put out an open vibe while I'm sitting here and see who comes over and is attracted to it. And smile and make eye contact with the checker at the grocery store. Just do little things when you're standing in line. Practice putting out different vibes and see what happens just in these spaces. If you're in a situation where you feel like it would be weird if you just came to school or work one day and had this completely different vibe, then don't worry about that. For one, as long as you're being genuine, people are going to think like, oh, she's having a great day or something like that. If you're really in kind of a toxic situation and you don't feel comfortable doing that, then try to seek out some spaces that are either neutral or new. Like in a grocery store, can you practice having a different vibe, being more open, making eye contact, having different conversation, not being sarcastic, things like that. Try that and see what happens. So just try to kind of put out different vibes when you're in those neutral spaces, coffee houses, cafes, any type of store, walking down the street, whatever it may be. And as always, be safe. Don't invite unwanted energy. Sometimes you have to vibe people so they'll stay away from you, but learn when to turn that on and when to turn that off. And don't adopt a scared mindset where you apply a negative vibe to everyone that comes into your space. They're not all out to take advantage of you. Most of them just want to have a pleasant day. So let me know how it goes, and know that I love you and know that I support you. And I'll see you in the next one.